Welcome to this new video. I'm currently at home with all my children. I'm sure nobody cares, but I do want to introduce you to them. This over here is Miss Alejandra. This is Quinn. This is Len. This is Ray. This is Dexter. Oh, this is Mello. This is Magella. I keep forgetting her name even though she has the coolest name of them all. This is Leo. This is Toto. This is Clarice. And this one, I actually never can manage to remember her name because she usually just sits up on my drawer and I never speak to her. I'm sure you loved meeting them, but I also know you didn't came for that. You came for the books. Everything I've read this summer so far. To me, the summer isn't really over, but in a way, it kind of is. So I'm just gonna say, like, everything I read this summer. So the first book I read in June was Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. And I have a friend who is absolutely obsessed with her and who was really up my ass trying to get me to read her. And I wasn't mad. I really loved it. It's a book about this woman who lives in California. She's from Nevada, and it's really like a rocky desert kind of vibe. I lived in Vegas when I was 15 for 1 year, and because this book doesn't really have a plot, this woman, she goes through a lot. She has a marriage that's not really working out, but there's talk about the bigger topic of fertility and being a woman and the right to choose. I'm not so sure because it was 2 months ago whether it was an abortion or a miscarriage, but it was very, very emotional. And what I was just trying to say is that even though that there wasn't much actually happening, for me it was so beautiful because it reminded me so much of my time in Vegas, and the vibes are just immaculate. The writing is very good. The next book I read was The Summer I Turned Pretty, and I am, I guess, a virgin, or at least very inexperienced when it comes to romance novels. I know from TikTok that apparently people had a huge obsession with this when they were like 13, 14, and I can see why, but I think I just read this too late, and I'm not the biggest fan of like sweet romance novels, but it was fine. The next one I read was God or Gott by Schirach. And to all my German peeps out there, I know we love him. I do love him, but this one just sucks. It's about assisted suicide. So if you're super sick and you kind of want to die, like how's the doctor gonna help you, etc. And it's like a moral debate between different people. I also saw it at the theater, and I'm just not a fan because to me it just read like my basic philosophy or ethics class in high school. Like you just have like different arguments, everybody says their argument, and then at the end it's like, oh well, we don't have one solution. It's like, okay, whatever. I think my biggest pet peeve with this one is that I have such high standards for Mr. Schirach's plotting and just the way he kind of creates mysterious, interesting, fascinating, dark stories, and in this one it was just, I felt like nothing was happening. For the next one, honestly, I'm not sure if you would even count it. I don't know if people put like their academic, like school research kind of books into their Goodreads, if they actually count those in. But in June, I've read a lot of Mr. Sigmund Freud for uni. I've read this Big Chunky Boy. I've read 3 other books by him, but I read them on my computer. And the thing with Freud is, I know he's super controversial just in general, but also when it comes to feminist debates and feminist questions that are raised, because even though his work was extremely new at the time, it was shocking and also revolutionary, he was still like pretty, you know, sexist and homophobic, caught in the times that he was in, I guess. And that's why I kind of wouldn't recommend to just read it for fun. I would recommend it, I would recommend taking a class on it if you're studying in uni, or if you're like in a setting where there's other people you can discuss this. Otherwise it's just like, you know, it's a lot. But if you want to really read it and you don't have that opportunity, you should just like look into more research and more texts that supplement Freud, so you get a better understanding and get a better understanding of the criticism that is also geared towards him. The next book I read in June was My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I'm insanely obsessed. It's so basic that I'm obsessed with this book. Like, I don't even know, like it kind of bothers me. But it's so amazing. It's a satire about this wealthy woman who wants to sleep for a year to cure all of her issues in life. And it's very dark, it's very funny in a dark way. And yeah, the prose is chef's kiss. I'm gonna speed run through the next ones because they were also for school, and that was Selected Poems by Angelina Weld Grimke. She's a Harlem Renaissance black lesbian poet who is just insane. I love her. Her poetry is so good. It's from the beginning of the 20th century. Then there's also Amy Lowell, who was an Imagist poet from the beginning of the 20th century. And she also writes this gorgeous lesbian poetry. It's so good. I also reread Tender Buttons by Gertrude Stein, who's another lesbian poet from the beginning of the 20th century. And I also read one volume of Rainer Maria Rilke's poems. All of those 4 poets slap so hard, and I loved that 3 of them were queer women. The next thing I read was Time as a Mother by Ocean Wong because I was in quarantine when I had COVID. You can watch that video if you haven't yet, and I talk about it a lot in that video. It's a poetry collection about his mother who passed away, and it's very beautiful and very touching. Next up is an absolute fan favorite and obsession, and I don't know why it's only now that I read this book, but it's The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Look at all those tabs. I made a whole tabbing system for this one. It's crazy how I annotated this one. It's about these kids in New England at like a preppy upstate liberal arts college. They're studying classics and they get obsessed with darkness and murder and elitism. It's just slay. I'm not gonna talk about it for too long. Next up is Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I read this in July and it absolutely kicked me in my stomach. This book made me realize that I love suffering through books. I love like really relating with unlikable characters. I love going like with them through their whole journey. I love being in pain because I closed this book, I cried, and just had the biggest hole in my stomach. Cleopatra and Frankenstein is insanely aesthetically pleasing. Just the cover art is everything. The title, oof, it's Cleo and Frank who meet in New York City, and Cleo is a young and broke and kind of lost and also unlikable artist girly, and Frank is this kind of like rich older dude who works in advertising, and they fall in love and they have this like super cute love story, and you're like, wow, it's gonna be like a beautiful romance novel, but then everything just starts spiraling out of control and it just gets darker and darker, and also I guess better and better. For those people who have read it, there's one specific character called Eleanor, and everybody and their mother seems to love her, but I do hate this character so much. I actually made a TikTok about this book saying the exact same thing, that I really hated this character and why, and then the same day Jack Edwards, I love him, biggest fan, you know, does a video, talks about this book and says how much he loves Eleanor and how like his audience, we're all gonna love it. And I was like, no, just absolute no. She's like super funny and relatable and quirky, but to me she's just so mediocre, like she bothers me. And then Cleo on the other side, who everybody who reads this book seems to hate because she's absolutely annoying, egotistic, and just like really like hard pick-me vibes. Like her, I don't know, I kind of love it. It's just, you know, like nice people, funny people, good people, like Eleanor in real life. I obviously prefer them, but in books they just bore me, and I need fucked up characters. Yeah. The next book I read was Queenie by Candace Carty Williams, and this is a book that was heavily praised everywhere by your favorite booktubers, by the press, whatever, and I absolutely did not like this. Queenie is this young woman who lives in London, and she is struggling in her life. She's struggling with mental health issues. She has this ex-boyfriend who was just also treating her really, really terribly. She's dealing with racism. She is dealing with like some issues in her friendship, and honestly her life is just going downwards, to put it lightly. When I started reading this, I thought like, oh, this could be such an interesting take on the intersection of race and mental health issues, because as a lot of us know, there's certain things like that stem from your identity that can have a huge impact on your mental health. For example, being a person of color, being black, being transgender, being part of the LGBTQ community in general, and these two parts of your identity do intersect, and it does have an impact. And I was like, wow, this could be super interesting. And some people say it is. In my opinion, this book was so flat. And the thing is, this book felt so flat because the characters felt so underdeveloped. Like, all of the people that she is talking about didn't even feel like real human beings because they were so 2D, like not 3D. Even Queenie, who narrates this book for 300 pages, to me felt like she wasn't even like a real complex character. And then what also really impressed me was there was so much casual and systemic racism that stayed completely unaddressed. And then also at some point she wants to write an article about Black Lives Matter protests, and her editor says no because it's like the audience won't like it. But then it's never mentioned again, and it could have been like, both of these things could have been such an interesting part of the plot, but they just aren't. She has some issues with sex, so she uses sex as a coping mechanism, and this just plays into the whole book as well. And what I was just trying to do is that this year I read a book that's similar to Queenie in terms of topics, but that other book, which was Luster by Raven Leilani, was so beautifully written. It was so deep. It had so much context. I felt like I was really learning so much. I got into this world, and I read that book and it changed me, you know, like it left a big impression, whereas this woman did nothing for me. So yeah, that was a big disappointment because I was so excited to love it. The next book I read was Crudo by Olivia Liang, and I have a friend who's obsessed with Olivia Liang, a feminist writer who is one of the big names in auto theory, which is a mode of feminist writing. And this is her novel that deals with the apocalypse and kind of the current state of the world. It's the summer of 2017, and Katie, who, you know, might be Katie Acker or might not be, is in a marriage with a nameless husband. It's never really mentioned what his name is, and she's honestly just moving around. There's not that much happening, but it's very interesting, like her thoughts. She keeps on dropping like random bits of information of what's happening in the world, and it's super relatable because it's things like Trump, North Korea, fear of a nuclear kind of apocalypse or a nuclear war. It's a lot of like very recent political topics that are covered in this, and she doesn't just like describe them and explain what's going on, but her character Katie, she really reacts to those events happening around her, and that reaction and the void that her character feels is just very relatable. I thought I would include like my current reads because August has not been so productive, and I'm finally reading this popular girly, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I just started it last week too, and I was a bit like underwhelmed, but some people on Instagram have been saying that it gets insanely good, so I will stick with it and I will actually go through. Also, I can't just not finish books, like it's a disease, I can't do it. There is this rich famous actress and this poor new young journalist girly, and the famous actress wants to tell the young girly all about her life. She's very old, she's gonna die. She wants her to publish a book which will make her millions of dollars because she's so famous. and she wants her to write the memoir. So I am sure that Mrs. Evelyn had an affair with her father, and I know she had 7 husbands, but he was the only one that she ever truly loved, and this girly is actually her daughter. I don't know if that's the actual story. I just made this up. You can comment down below if I'm right or if I'm totally wrong. Hello, it's Val from the future, and I just want to say, oh my god, I was terribly wrong. So I actually filmed a whole reading vlog start to finish for this novel, and it's gonna come out in 2 weeks, I think. So yeah, that's gonna be exciting because you can see how I was feeling about this book then, and I can maybe tell how I'm feeling about it now. But you should definitely check that video out when it comes out. It's gonna be really fun. If you saw my last Amsterdam vlog, I got 3 books in Amsterdam at this vintage bookstore cafe. A lot of you guys were asking me about the name, and it's called Le Flâneur Amsterdam. And I'm currently also reading Lettres au Castor. It's the letters between Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir from 1940 to 1963. This is a first edition with this magical 1983 newspaper picture of them in it. And because it's in French and my brain is a bit, you know, slow, I'm glad I have this, which is like a more pop culture cutesy read to kind of relax my brain. I bought this crazy 100-year-old Sigmund Freud first edition. This is the first volume. This is the second volume. This is actually 100 years old. This was printed like, I don't know, last year or something. But it's crazy and it's my treasure. I brought these 2 books because I thought I read them in June, but I don't even remember if it was June or May. But yeah, The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides is one of my favorites. My Policeman, also insanely beautiful, but I think I've already talked about them at some point on social media. In Amsterdam, I got Jeffrey Eugenides, so it's the same author. I think this is his 2nd novel or 3rd. The Marriage Plot. I'm very excited for her. I was in Berlin and I was gonna meet some friends at a museum, and I walked past this bookstore that I've walked past like a million times, and I didn't realize that they are like specialized on psychoanalysis and psychology. So they had a lot of super cheap vintage old Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis books, and I got this one because it just looks so pretty. Sigmund Freud psychoanalysis. It's just like some random text. Then I got this one also because it's so pretty and it's tiny. Sigmund Freud, Childhood Memories of Leonardo da Vinci. And then Otto Rank, The Trauma of Birth and His Meaning for Psychoanalysis. And I just love this surrealist painting on it. And honestly, I kind of just bought them because they were like €2 and they just look cool. And I have an obsession with psychoanalysis at the moment, so she's in her Freud era and I'm not sure we approve. This was my summer reading wrap up. Please let me know if I should do this more often. I feel a bit pressured because it's always like such a race, like not just between like me and friends or people, but also between like booktubers being like, oh, I see everybody like on the internet reading like 300 books a year, and like my goal is 52 and I'm doing okay with that. So yeah, I always feel a bit like, oh, I don't read enough, whatever, but it's just my brain. I hope I can motivate you to read more. I hope I can give you some inspiration to do your thing and be happy. And I will see you guys in my next video. If you guys have any recommendations for books, also please let me know. And if you have requests for videos that you want me to do, also please let me know because I will probably do it. Guys, I'm about to hop in the shower and I just realized I forgot a book. Circe by Madeline Miller. I listened to the audiobook and I read The Song of Achilles first and I loved it. And Circe was, I hate to say this, but it was not as good. Like, yeah, strong female protagonist, Greek goddesses. I love Greek mythology. So yeah, it was still very good. I would recommend if you like Greek mythology, if you're into Madeline Miller, go ahead. It's still super fun. It wasn't as heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching as The Song of Achilles, but I think it's just because there was no gay romance involved, and gay romance just makes me like instantly sobbed. Like I just instantly sobbed. So yeah, I'm gonna go shower now, and I hope you loved this video, and yeah, see you soon.